just like the way that Francis Perkins talked about the Triangle Shirtwaist workers standing on the ledge and they couldn't go forward and they couldn't go back. If we don't have a vision of a real economy that really works for people to jump into the future in, they will keep going back to the Tea Party. And that's the real work that the Blue-Green Alliance is trying to do. Nowhere is that clearer than in the coalfields that are represented by our lunchtime speaker. And I just, Vietnam veteran, 6th generation coal miner, Cabin Creek, West Virginia native, and a man, Eric talked about the visual of the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I want to suggest to you that it actually may not bend towards justice unless there are millions of people pulling it, kind of like the people who hold down the Macy's balloon at Thanksgiving. There have to be millions of people pulling the arc towards justice, or it doesn't go that way. And one of the strongest, best pullers that we have on our side is Cecil Roberts.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, let me thank Charlotte for that wonderful introduction. She said she'd do that if I gave her some money, which I did. I'd like to take a moment to just reflect for a second on the wonderful panel we just heard from. These are people who have dedicated their lives to making working class people's jobs better, safer, more healthy. And all of you in this room that I know who are representatives from your various organizations have dedicated your lives to doing that. If we could have a round of applause for those folks, I'd appreciate it. I am so honored to have this opportunity. Those of you who can't understand a word I'm saying, and you think you've heard this accent before, do you remember the old TV show Green Acres? Well, I'm Mr. Haney. And any of you who can't understand what I'm saying, our next speaker will interpret for you. But I really don't have an accent because God, he talks just like me. And if you don't believe that, someday you'll get to the pearly gates and St. Peter looked you dead in the eye. He said, y'all get in the pickup truck here. We're going up to the big house shortly, and you'll understand exactly what I'm saying at this moment. I want to recognize someone who's in the room here. Congressman Miller was in the previous movie that we just watched. And by the way, my compliments to those who put that together. It's a wonderful piece. But Richard Miller, his staff person, is here. And no one has been a stronger advocate on behalf of health and safety, particularly for coal miners in the last few years than Congressman George Miller from California. And Richard Miller, his staff person. Stand up, Richard. He doesn't want to stand up. Let me make a couple of observations. All of us in the labor movement, we're very demanding people, and rightfully so. That's how we got the jobs that we have, and we put enormous pressure on our elected officials, particularly President Obama. But I just want to take a moment and say that we should be very appreciative of his pick for the Secretary of Labor. He could not have picked anyone better to represent working class people than Hilda Solis. And I believe that from the bottom of my heart. And I believe that Dr. David Michaels is doing a yeoman's job at OSHA trying to protect the workers in this country. And history was made when President Obama appointed for the first time ever a real coal miner right out of the ranks of the United Mine Workers, first time in history, Joe Main, to head MSHA. And I wanted to say how much we appreciate that. I brought with me someone who can do a much better job of speaking to you than I ever could. Stanley Goose Stewart is a dear friend of mine. Stanley worked at the Upper Big Branch mine, and by the grace of God, Stanley's with us today. He was in the mine when it exploded. He was very close to the outside and had to run for his life. Stanley has not just said, oh, this is a terrible thing, where's my next job? He has not worked another day in a coal mine since this explosion. He has gone to his friends' funerals. He has worked with his friends' wives and children and family members. He has picked up the gauntlet and carried it forward. He has testified before the United States Congress twice. He has testified to MSHA. He has testified to all those who are investigating this tragedy because he wants justice for his friends who are no longer with us. I am reminded of Dr. King when he was preaching in Birmingham, and he was trying to get people to be arrested in Bull Connor's town. That wasn't going over quite well. Huge crowds every night. Thousands would come out and hear Dr. King speak, and then he would call for volunteers to be arrested, and no one would come forward. If you remember, in those days, they used a lot of the children, high school kids from the schools to be arrested. One night, Dr. King, like the rest of us, was very frustrated as he stood in the pulpit and everybody was amening and praising Dr. King, and he got frustrated. And he looked at the crowd and he says something to the effect of, you should not only be able to preach a sermon from the pulpit, you must be able to preach a sermon with the way you live your life. And I want you to bring a person to this podium who has preached a sermon with the way he's led his life. Stanley Goose Stewart, my friend.
Well, Cecil, I would like to say something to you. You need to work on getting rid of that accent like I did.